So here's the question. Did Gerald Gardner discover an ancient religion hiding in plain sight? Or did he help one come alive when the world was ready for it? Because Gardner didn't just study witchcraft, he didn't just practice it. He traveled the world, collected beliefs like souvenirs, got tattooed, joined secret societies, cast spells against Hitler, and became known as the father of modern Wicca. History will debate what he discovered, but one thing is certain, he did a lot of it naked. Gerald Gardner was born in 1884 into a wealthy English family, which should have meant boarding school, rigid rules, and a very respectable life. Instead, he was constantly sick, severe asthma, bad enough that doctors basically said, England is trying to unalive him, get this kid somewhere warm. So Gardner doesn't grow up in classrooms. He grows up traveling, Madeira, the Canary Islands, usually with just his nurse. No rigid education, no formal curriculum, no one drilling into him how the world should be. Around 1900, Gardner leaves Europe entirely and heads to Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, to work on a tea plantation. And this is where his life really starts to bend, because Gardner doesn't just work, he absorbs beliefs about reincarnation, ideas about the soul, folk magic, local rituals, things that look nothing like Christianity. He becomes what historians later call a spiritual magpie, picking up whatever shines. Freemasonry? Yes, initiated in 1910. Indigenous ritual practices? Absolutely. While in Borneo, he befriends local tribes and gets elaborate snake and dragon tattoos, which, for an English civil servant at the time, was almost unthinkable. He studies ritual weapons like the Malay kris so deeply, he writes a scholarly book on it. These traditions gave Gardner permission to imagine a world where Christianity wasn't the only spiritual truth, and from there, his search turned backward, toward other forms of spirituality and occult practices that might have existed closer to home, buried beneath Europe's Christian past. By the 1930s, Gardner retires and returns to England, and his body immediately rebels. Cold, damp, health problems come roaring back. Then comes one of the strangest moments in the story. His doctor tells him to try nudism. Sunlight, fresh air, no clothes. And Gardner doesn't even hesitate. He joins a naturist club, feels better, and decides nudity isn't just healthy, it's energetically freeing. To outsiders, this looked eccentric. To someone thinking in terms of energy, it made perfect sense. Gardner begins exploring England's occult scene. Spiritualist churches, seances, mystical societies. Eventually, he joins the Rosicrucian Crotona Fellowship, and he's, well, unimpressed, too theatrical, too scripted, not enough power. But through them, he meets a woman named Edith Woodford Grimes, magical name Dafo, and she opens a door. It's September 1939. War has just broken out. Gardner is invited to a private house near the New Forest. He's blindfolded, led into a candlelit room. People are chanting. And then he hears a word he's never heard before, Wicca. When the blindfold comes off, he's told he's standing among a secret coven of witches, remnants of a pre-Christian religion. Later historians would debate whether this coven was truly ancient or a modern revival inspired by Margaret Murray. But Gardner never tells it that way, because once a story takes hold, it doesn't need to be proven. It needs to be lived. Now it's summer 1940. Hitler is planning to invade Britain. So what does a small coven of secret witches do? They cast a spell. They call it Operation Cone of Power. Because of wartime blackouts, there's no bonfire, just a single shuttered lantern aimed symbolically toward Berlin. They dance in a spiral, sky-clad, raising energy, chanting one thought over and over: "You cannot cross the sea." Gardner later claims the same spell had been used against Napoleon, even the Spanish Armada, and according to him, the cost was real. Several older witches died weeks later from the sheer energy they expended. Did magic stop Hitler? No one can prove that. But in magic, the question is often, less did it work, and more did it change the people who cast it? The invasion never came, and that story becomes the backbone of Wicca's mythology. After the war, Gardner becomes strategic. He buys land next to a naturist club, moves a 16th century cottage onto it, turns it into a ritual space, privacy, no questions about nudity. He keeps blending traditions, ceremonial magic, folk spellcraft, Masonic structure, Eastern philosophy. In 1947, he meets Aleister Crowley. Gardner borrows heavily from ceremonial language and ritual structure, sometimes a little too heavily. But witchcraft is still illegal, so he hides his work in fiction. In 1949, he publishes High Magic's Aid. Not subtle, just legally safer. In 1952, Doreen Valiente reads an article about witches stopping Hitler and thinks, "Wait, what?" She writes to Gardner. They meet, they click. In 1953, he initiates her at Stonehenge. She becomes High Priestess. Then she reads the Book of Shadows and notices something. A lot of this isn't ancient. It's Crowley. It's Leland. It's modern occult literature. So she confronts him. And Gardner doesn't deny it. He says, "The original material was fragmentary. I filled in the blanks." Then he challenges her. "If you think you can do better, go ahead." And this is where something important happens. The tradition doesn't break, it breathes. Valiente rewrites the rituals, removes the clunky language, adds poetry, including the Charge of the Goddess, which becomes the spiritual heart of Wicca. But Gardner loves publicity, tabloids, headlines, nudist witches. Valiente doesn't. She also questions the old laws. Gardner keeps adding rules that conveniently keep him in control. By 1957, they part ways. Gardner doesn't slow down. In 1954, he publishes Witchcraft Today, claims witchcraft is a real, living religion, gets Margaret Murray to write the foreword, opens the Museum of Magic and Witchcraft on the Isle of Man, greets tourists in robes, sometimes with a snake, and fully embraces the title, Father of Modern Witchcraft. From a historian's view, Gerald Gardner probably didn't uncover an untouched ancient religion. But from an esoteric view, that's not the only way something becomes real. Gardner didn't just repeat rituals, he activated them. He took belief, structure, story, and repetition, and created a current people could step into. He wasn't a saint. He wasn't a liar. He was a threshold figure, someone standing between what was and what could be, holding the door open long enough for others to walk through. Gardner died in 1964, buried at sea. But what he helped call into being didn't die with him, because in magic, traditions don't survive because they're old. They survive because people keep showing up. And that might be the real spell.